Retro Horror back for a review here of slasher film. I squeezed this in between all the Christmas movies. This is the '88 film's release for Drive-In Massacre. This is a proto slasher. Before Halloween and before Friday the 13th, you had this film, which was made in '77 by a guy named Stu Siegel, who kind of trolled around. His story is kind of interesting. He was a private investigator, and he got somehow ended up on a movie set and ended up being like a grip and just doing things around the set, and ultimately cobbled his own money together and started shooting films. Um, some softcore porn, things like that, but then he did this, uh, which is a guerrilla filmmaking. You know, it's the wild wild west of the '70s, and it's classic guerrilla filmmaking. You do have some interesting moments in this film. Uh, what you got here is a slasher that has a proclivity for using a sword, and he likes drive-ins. He likes to kill people that are going to make out and mess around at the drive-in. And back in the '70s, that was in the '60s, of course. Drive-ins were a big thing. So I was very familiar with those. So the concept was interesting. Some of the first kill in this film is, I mean, it's crudely done, but it's very well done in its own right. You've got a decapitation with a sword, and then he runs the sword through the girl's neck, one end out the other. And I mean, it wasn't Tom Savini material, but it was pretty good. After that, you've got a few interesting characters. You've got two cops that kind of come off like Abbott and Costello. You've got Buck Flower playing a drunk at the end, and his daughter actually has a cameo as well. And Buck Flower has been like, I mean, he's had cameo roles in like every John Carpenter movie. He's in this. You've got a drive-in manager that looks like he's from a '70s porn movie. He's got a shaved head and a '60s psychedelic suit going on, and necklace and all that stuff. So you've got some interesting characters. The film kind of drags. It's 75 minutes, but it drags the last 15, 20 minutes. I think they just kind of run out of storyline. It's more of a police procedural kind of thing, where these two cops couldn't find their way out of a wet paper bag are trying to solve these murders. So that's mildly entertaining. Let me run through the slasher totals here. You've got two decapitations, one knife through the neck, one knife in the back, which gets two. It's a twofer. One set of nice tits, and actually the girl I forget her name, but she actually went on to star in some other movies, ironically enough, in the '80s. I'm trying to remember her name. The brunette that shows her tits off. One bald. I've talked about the bald drive-in manager with the bad '60s outfit. You got an Abbott and Costello police-style detectives. One of the guys is a name of Goff, who actually wrote. He and Buck Flower wrote the screenplay for this thing. One music track that sounds like a cat being squashed on a Casio player. It's screechy. There's moments actually when the soundtrack of this film makes you think of Halloween to some extent, but as a precursor to that sound, that kind of a thumping sound. But they played it on a Casio, so what do you want? One shadow of a sword hacking. So this film kind of adds up to about a 10, 9, 10. It's right on the borderline of a classic slasher. A few special features in this thing. You've got a little booklet, 2 or 3 page. Really, you got to have the magnifying glass to read the print, but it's an interesting write-up of introduce Stu Seagal and how his background. Um, you've got a 6-minute interview with Stu Seagal that he kind of talks about how he got into movie making. And then you have a 15-minute interview with Justin Kurzweil, who does the Hysteria Lives podcast, and I thought that was an interesting retrospective. He certainly played the movie up to more than it probably is, which was kind of nice. But the movie is what it is. It's a guerrilla slasher movie made on a no budget, and from some people that were into softcore porn and other outlets. And I think you have to remember too that back in the 70s and really up to the early 80s, slasher films were kind of viewed as softcore porn in some respects. They were not well received by even decent society and critics and things like that. So that it doesn't surprise me that you had a lot of artists that were in that kind of industry that would cross over the mainstream, or what they perceived as mainstream, as in slasher films. So I'm going to recommend it as a completist. I think you got to have it. This is Spine 20 of the Slasher collection from 88 Films. I'm going to recommend it. The release and the print and the sound is excellent. The quality of the print and the audio is excellent, so you can't go wrong with that. 88 Films did a good job. All right, with that, I will wrap up this review. Thanks for watching.